Yeah.
Exactly. And so seeing the accomplishments that you have made and seeing that where you're at today, you know, and sometimes I wonder, how is it that these guys, you know, get to where they're at in Hollywood, making 6-7 figures through these projects?
You know, man, that's a tough thing. And I'm going to say this, and this is only my lane, right? This is only the road that I've driven. I can't say that this is gospel for everybody else. This is just my opinion from my perspectives and the road that I've traveled. You know, when you can't, it's hard because you can't tell a new filmmaker, man, the road's going to be tough. And you can't really share with people how rough it's actually going to be because they see the few YouTube stars. You know, let's say there's 20 men and women out there that are killing it on YouTube. Let's say 50, 100, doesn't matter. There's billions of people on this planet. So you're taking such a small minute and trying to compare yourself to them. You might be as good as them. That's fine. But the algorithms and the way that media has changed in the last 5 years is not the same even when they started. So let me give you an example. So let's say you're making $100,000 in a job, right? And let's say you want to go be a filmmaker. Okay, let's say it's going to take you 4 years to get that filmmaking career up and going, right? So not only are you going to continue to need to make the $100,000 that you need to pay for your mortgage, your wife, your kids, school, groceries, all that stuff, right? So that's let's say 4 years. So you need $400,000 saved to go do that. Now, that's not including any money that you're putting into your business, right? You and I both know the stuff that we use, even the mid-tier stuff that you and I use, is not the nicest stuff in the world. It's not the Reds. It's not the ultra-crazy primes that are $20,000, $80,000 a lens, right? We have nice stuff, but we don't have the ultra-nice stuff. Even mid-tier stuff's going to cost you $200,000 to have nice stuff. Okay.
Mid-tier stuff.
Yeah. So you're talking, so you got 4 years of grinding that you still have to pay your bills. There's $400. You got to put $200 back in the business, right? And that's just to get your gear. Then you're going to have to spend money on ads to get your name out there, to get an agent. So you're $600, $700, $800 into this thing before you even have any momentum. Now, there's a chance you're just naturally talented and you're better than everybody else. And there are those men and women that are absolutely out there. I see kids making shit on iPhones and I'm like, man, that kid should be making movies. That guy's awesome, right? I'm like, they're better than me, man. But this is the thing. It's not about talent at a certain level. It's about who you know and getting someone to open the door. I mean, ultimately, that's what it comes down to. There's a lot of us that are good at what we do, but how do you break through to the next level? You got to have somebody open that door for you. I don't care who you are. I don't care, you know, if you got the biggest muscles or the biggest boobs or whatever it may be, or you do whatever you hear that Hollywood people do to get ahead. It's not enough anymore. You have to have somebody up there, or somebody has to see something in you and give you an opportunity to open a door, because you can't break through on your own. It's too tight. It's too close. It's too tight net. They're not going to open the door for everybody. They're just not. That's just how it is.
So you're saying for us indie filmmakers, the only way for us to actually get an opportunity to make it into these films that we see in terms of big budget is for somebody to open the door for us.
It does. And you have to have money. I mean, if you look at the Sundance Film Festival, the Sundance Film Festival was originally started by Robert Redford to really just be an avenue for independent filmmakers. And who I consider independent filmmakers are you and I. We're independent filmmaking guys. That's what we do. But you have Jake Gillette and those guys doing stuff for Sundance. That's not an independent filmmaker. $4 million, $8 million, $10 million budget. That's not an independent film to me, man. That's Hollywood. Are you kidding me? You know, the $30,000 that I spent, that's independent, baby.
Yeah.
So that's, like I said, once again, man, that's just my perspective, right?
Yeah, see, so this is one thing that I've always wondered, okay? So these big budgets, okay? Like, let's say it's a $1 million, $2 million budget just to make the film.
I thought you said big budget.
That's not big budget?
No, man, that's small.
Really?
That's small.
So let's say even 10 million.
Okay. Now we're getting into it. Okay.
Now we're just getting into it with 10 million.
Yeah.
So let's say 10 million. Okay.
Yep.
And we were to go ahead and shoot this, and we did everything that we can. Now, based on movie sales a lot of times don't even surpass 10 million. So I just wondered how these movies, or how you even make a profit if it just doesn't make sense to me. So you see what I'm saying?
You're trying to dig into my movie knowledge now, aren't you?
Because that's one thing that always didn't make sense to me. Because now that I've gotten into it, you know, and I'm seeing like, man, these guys have got the high end gear. These got, you know, they got to be making a profit. But I mean, if you're making these movies spending like, let's say 20 million, and the movie ticket sales doesn't even, you know, come up to that, or even, you know, so I've always just like, it just didn't make sense to me. So I've always wondered how it works.
So as I got into this, you know, I approached this filmmaking thing as almost a corporate kind of lens, right? Like I always looked at problems very methodically, right? What's causing this problem? How do we fix it? How do we get from A to B to Z, right? So I started studying not only films, but where they came from, where the funding was, who are the people behind these things, so I could figure out, man, how do I break through, right? How, if I can maybe look at 20 or 30 people's journey into becoming what we consider successful big time Hollywood blockbusters, right? Okay. Maybe I can follow one of their paths. And I'll give you a couple examples. And it started giving me some really unique insight into, man, is this all a fugazi? Is this real? Is this not? What is this shit? Yeah. And it really gives you some insight. So Black Label Media, have you heard of them?
Never.
You know the Sicario films?
Never heard of it.
Okay. There's two films. They're called, so it's Sicario 1, Sicario 2. I don't know the names of them. They're different, but it's 1 and 2 basically.
Is this like a series?
It's a part 1 and a part 2.
Okay.
It's not really part 1 and part 2, but they're all the same characters. Josh Brolin's in it. I mean, there's some great actors in it. But bottom line is these films have been hugely successful, and most of the money that is made on films today are made overseas. They're not made in the U.S. Usually only 20 to 30% of the movie making, you know, ticket sales are done in the U.S. Everything's done outside of the U.S. That's something people need to understand very, very quickly.
Really?
Yes. If you look at, you'll see U.S. sales and then you'll see international sales. That's why you see people like The Rock and all those guys doing all those movie premieres over there. So they'll actually release the movies over there because most of the funding for the films is done overseas. It may be under the Hollywood umbrella, but most of that stuff is done overseas. And when I say most, I'm not saying 80%, 90%. I'm just saying the majority of the films that I like and research are funded over there. Black Label Media, I looked at that production company and I thought, man, where did these guys come from? Who made this film? Who's the brains behind this film? This woman, I don't know her name. She started Black Label Media about, I'm going to say 10 years ago. And she started making Sicario. And Sicario is, if you had to ask me, man, what film would you like to make? Like, where's the upper epsilon of something that you'd want to make? Where do you want to be with your career? Sicario, period. Those two movies are some of my favorite movies. The way they move, they're shot, the dynamic feel of it, the brazas in it, the way that the audio's mixed. I love it. And it's got a lot of gun stuff, which I'm a huge gun guy.
Yeah.
So I started researching, who is this lady? So this lady is the daughter of the guy that started Fedex.
What?
Yeah. So the guy that started Fedex, I don't know if he's currently still the CEO. At the time I researched it, he was. It's his daughter. And he bankrolled Black Label Media. He also bankrolled the bond to make the first Sicario. He put up the first $25 million. The studio put up the rest. So I look at that and I'm like, oh, it's a rich kid. But then I started watching, let's see what she does with her second film. So she goes back to what she knows, right? She puts out another Sicario film. And it's just as good, if not better, than the first one. So she kills it. They've done some other projects here and there too, but I take my hats off to her. She went and hired some great executives in the industry, some really talented men and women, and put them on her team and made some great films. They're spectacular films. Like I said, I think they're some of the best films ever made, in my opinion, because I like them. They appeal to me. So I'm like, okay. So that was made by Fedex money, rich kid money. But the girl did a lot. She did her own thing. So my hat's off to her. She's not just a rich kid. She made something happen. Then I started researching Wolf of Wall Street. You know, a lot of my dad was based heavily on the Wolf of Wall Street character. He was that kind of guy, right? I grew up in that kind of world. You know, my dad was a rock and roll car guy, and there's a script in the works with his life right now too that I'm working on with my brother. So it's a really crazy story, and it's literally as crazy as the Wolf of Wall Street. So I started researching, okay, who funded that? Well, the funding behind the Wolf of Wall Street is done by some company, one of the Arab companies. I don't want to say Dubai because I don't like the blanket. I don't know enough, so I'm going to speak to this very lightly. It might have been Dubai. It might have been somebody else over there. It might have been Iraq. I don't know. but one of the diplomats over there and one of the people in the government stole money from the government and put up the money to make Wolf of Wall Street. So,
boy, they stole money from the government to make the movie Wolf of Wall Street.
Yes, look it up. It's absolutely crazy. So one of the biggest junk bond fraud guys in history's movie was funded by stolen money. I mean, it's it's crazy, man, right? It's absolutely crazy. It really is. It's absolutely crazy. And the stories in Hollywood go on and on and on about that. So as I started researching that, I'm like, okay, is this shit real? I mean, really, what is it? And then you start seeing a lot of directors that get their big break in Hollywood and then they leave. Then they go make independent stuff, or they go make commercials, or they do different stuff because they just don't like the environment. They don't like the restrictive controls or whatever it may be, or they just don't like it making movies for Hollywood guys. I don't know. I don't know any of those guys, so I can't say.
So the guys that we have in the impression, or like guys like me that actually want to be in there, the guys that are actually in there are the ones that are trying to get out.
I think some are. Yeah, I think some are. I do. Why, I don't know. I'm not in that inner circle. I can only speak from an outsider, right? They used to ask me, when I was in the corporate world, hey, what do you think about this? And I said, well, I can't give you a holistic answer, an educated answer, because my lane is only this. If you let me see the financials, what's going on behind the scenes, the money, the infighting, the corporate positioning, I can give you a better understanding of what we should do as a company. And it's the same thing. I can only speak to what I know. So when I speak in my opinions, my lane is very narrow. I don't have a full view of the highway. I only know what I know from my research and what I've learned in my own life. So
for them to actually have that movie funded for the Wolf of Wall Street,